Hey guys, what's up? The Olympic roster has been leaked. We have every reason to believe that this is the real roster, and we will be discussing it right here on 11 Yanks Breakdown. So my buddy Alex on Twitter released this roster. I happen to know he has very good sources. And by the way, he's a great follow. If you haven't followed him yet, go follow him on Twitter, guys. I'll put his handle in the description below. And like I said, I really believe this is probably the correct roster. Officially, it comes out on Thursday. If I'm wrong, I will address that. If this is the wrong roster, I will address it. It's possible that one or two guys will get injured and replaced, but this is very likely the roster. And guys, I have some concerns. We're going to dive into it in just a second, but before we do, if you're new here, welcome guys. Smash that subscribe button. We have new videos every week. If you're already subscribed, smash that like button. It helps other people to find us. All right, let's dig in. All right, so goalkeepers, David Ochoa, Matt Freese, and JT Marcinkowski. This is pretty much what I expected. Now, Jonathan Klinsmann was the other goalkeeper on this roster. He actually got injured a couple days ago and was replaced by Drake Callender, but obviously Drake doesn't make this final three. This is really a question between David Ochoa and JT Marcinkowski as far as who is going to start. JT Marcinkowski has a little bit more experience and is 3 years older. David Ochoa is the more talented keeper with the higher ceiling, and also he can play with his feet. The problem is David Ochoa has been injured for the last two camps that he called in. He was called in for the December camp when we played El Salvador and in January when we played TNT, and he was released from both camps with an injury. So I don't know how much that's going to impact his playing time or his place on this particular roster. I'd like to see David Ochoa play. He played a few games at the last Under-20 World Cup 2 years ago and was already the #1 goalkeeper. Now, at 20 years old, Ochoa is still eligible for the next Olympic cycle, which is mind-blowing, and really is a very high-end keeper. Mexico is interested in him. I think we should start David Ochoa, but I'm not in camp. I'm not Jason Kreis. I'm not seeing these two compete, so that'll be a very interesting one to watch. Fullbacks, again, is as I expected and something that I'm fairly comfortable with. Julian Araujo and Sam Vines will start on right back and left back, and Aaron Herrera will be the deputy for both of them. Now, Djordje was originally called up. We know Atlanta didn't release him. The other guy that was here was Marco Farfan. I'm really not surprised to not see Marco Farfan in this roster. Aaron Herrera I would describe as competent, but there's no reason why I think he's going to start. Now, I'm interested to see if Julian Araujo is going to end up playing center back. Now, I don't think he will because he's played right back for the U.S. before, and that is his best position. We are very, very weak at center back, and I know that Julian can play as a center back. He played that in some of the youth teams when he was at Barcelona, at LA Galaxy too. But ultimately, I think Julian Araujo is a right back, and if we're looking to get width and attacking impetus from our fullbacks, then yeah, it's going to be Sam Vines and Julian Araujo. Sam Vines, competent. All of these guys, competent. I think Julian Araujo has the highest ceiling. He's the youngest of all of them. He's the most technical. And I'm very curious to see what these two guys can do bombing forward. Aaron Herrera has played both right back and left back for RSL in the past, so I think it was smart having him as the backup to both of these guys. Center back. All right, Mauricio, Pineda, Henry Kessler, and Justen Glad. And guys, here is where I have some real concerns. Obviously, I wanted Miles Robinson. Obviously, I wanted some other center backs to be there, but this is the best we could really do. I'm surprised we didn't get Abubakar Keita. I think Abubakar Keita has a higher ceiling than some of these guys, but maybe the fact that he wasn't a locked-in starter for Columbus yet made it difficult. Michael Edwards recently transferred to Colorado Rapids from Wolfsburg, and I would have been curious to see him, but he made that transfer just a little bit too late to even make the provisional roster. Look, I'm torn with this center backs. Part of me is worried that these guys aren't going to be able to hold their own, and part of me is like, well, maybe the competition that we're going to face, outside of Mexico is just so poor that these guys will seem good and maybe they'll be competent. And I really hope that's the case. But this is probably one of the weakest spots on the field for me is center back. Our best under 23 center backs are all playing in Europe. Chris Richards, Mark McKenzie, Eric Palmer-Brown, and then of course Miles Robinson isn't here. So this is a weakness for me. Justen Glad has a lot of experience. He's been a professional starter for RSL now for 4 years. And that's the thing that you'll see throughout this entire roster is that there's a lot of experience compared to past Olympic rosters. Past Olympic rosters were largely comprised of guys who were either in European academies or in college or even MLS academies, but hadn't played a ton of minutes yet. So if there's one positive we can take away from this roster is all of these guys have a ton of pro minutes behind them. Andres Perea and Jackson Yueill are the defensive/holding midfielders on this roster. And I'm fine with that. They're different types of players. Andres Perea is better defensively. His job is going to be to win the ball, to shield that back line, but he isn't going to be a heavy distributor on the ball, which is more Jackson Yueill's thing. Jackson Yueill is one of those guys who can try and create from central midfield. Now, in the past, we've seen Jackson Yueill be very good with his distribution when he has time and space. When you compress time and space and when the other team makes concerted effort to deny him time and space on the ball, he's not able to do that. And defensively, he's not as good as Andres Perea. He is more experienced. He's 24. He's got quite a few pro seasons, has played 9 times for the senior team. So I imagine he will probably start, but there are some concerns with him as well. Now, Johnny Cardoso has played as a 6 for the senior team backing up Tyler Adams, and he's played there for his club Internacional as well. The question with him is, I don't think he's going to be a 6 on this roster. Because he's a very technical 6, I just think he's going to be playing higher up the field for this team because this central midfield, guys, lacks a lot of creativity. Hasani Dotson, what's he doing here? I mean, the guy is an 8. He's athletic. He's a college player who's now playing for Minnesota. He's going to run up and down the field, but he offers very little in terms of quality. Tanner Tessman, in my opinion, was a way better midfielder, not only because he was more athletic, but he also had a technique on the ball that I haven't really seen from Hasani Dotson. Djordje Mihailovic is a guy who is listed as a forward on the provisional roster, but on this roster is a central midfielder, which makes more sense. He's played most of his career as a dual 8, sort of a 10. Not extremely creative. I think that he's very limited. But I don't hate him being on this roster. Now, this central midfield is a bunch of athletes and very few technicians. Anybody who had real technical ability was left off of this roster. Caden Clark obviously was never called in, but even Cole Bassett and Frankie Amaya, who were on the 28-man roster, were left out. And for me, when you're playing teams that are going to bunker, that are going to play very deep defensively, which is how most teams are going to play against us in this tournament, you need guys who can pick a lock. You need guys who can turn with the ball at their feet, who can pass the ball in tight spaces, who can get out of tight spaces with technique. And I just don't see anybody here who can really do that, with the exception of maybe Johnny Cardoso. Like I said earlier, the lack of quality in our opponents is hopefully going to give them an edge, and they might even look good, but I have some concerns. Now, if I have concerns about the central midfield and the defense, well, that's the spine of the team. And look, guys, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we smash all of those teams. All right, let's get into the forwards now, and this was basically expected. Jesus Ferreira and Sebastian Soto are the 2 center forwards, 2 different kinds of center forwards, so that's good to see. Llanez is going to have to carry this attack on his back. Jonathan Lewis has looked pretty good every time he's played for the senior team, so I'm not surprised that he's here, although I think he has limitations as well. Sebastian Saucedo is very experienced, plays in Mexico. Maybe that gave him a little bit of an edge. I have said before, I think this guy is a one-trick pony, but it's not the end of the world. Benji Michel is a little bit of a surprise for me. I suppose I shouldn't be very surprised. He is a very athletic guy, not as technical as some of these other wide forwards, and he did have a very good season for Orlando in terms of his stats. Again, like most people on this roster, he's got a limited ceiling, but I hope that he is going to be somebody who can manage to look good against some of these opponents. Now, as far as the starting lineup goes, we're probably going to play a 4-3-3. That's what Jason Kreis is probably going to do based on what he's been doing with Greg Berhalter with the senior team, and they want continuity going through the entire team. So this is my starting lineup. David Ochoa in goal, Julian Araujo, Mauricio Pineda, Justen Glad, and Sam Vines. Now, Mauricio Pineda, I think, gets his spot here because of all the center backs, he's probably the best with his feet. Justen Glad has the most experience. I don't really rate Henry Kessler, but he could be starting too. Who knows? Jackson Yueill's ability to quarterback the team from that 6th position and his experience will probably start him there. I imagine Johnny Cardoso will start with Djordje Mihailovic. Llanez and Jonathan Lewis on the wings. This could be flipped. It could be Lewis on the left and Llanez on the right. I'm not sure. And my guess is that Jesus Ferreira starts over Sebastian Soto. Now, personally, I would probably pick Soto because I like his poacher instinct. But the way that Berhalter plays, he wants his forward to come deep, to get involved with the play, to sort of play almost as a false 9, although I don't really think that's how Ferreira plays. Now, Ferreira has shown that he's good at playing within Berhalter's system, And if that translates to this team, it'll be interesting to see how he does. If Ferreira is coming deep a lot, it's going to be very heavily on Jonathan Lewis and Llanez to make those runs in behind and hopefully try to score goals from those positions. Now, like I said, this is our C or D team, and I'm going to take this position by position, and we're going to look at the under 23 guys who could have been there and basically put a rank on each of these starting 11 where they rank in our entire under 23 roster. So we're including senior team guys. Basically, we're going to take everybody who's eligible for the Olympics and look at where these guys stand. David Ochoa, probably number one. Okay, he is probably our best under 23 goalkeeper. Ethan Horvath, Matt Turner, both too old. So here we've got our A goalkeeper. Julian Araujo, okay, is behind both Serginho Dest and Reggie Cannon. So that's probably our C right back at the under 23 level. Now, some people might put Brian Reynolds there ahead of him. Personally, I wouldn't. There's also other interesting guys like Shaq Moore and Matt Olasunde that are there. I don't think they're ahead of Julian Araujo, but at best, this guy is our C. Who's missing at center back? Chris Richards, Mark McKenzie, Miles Robinson, and Eric Palmer-Brown, for me, are ahead of both of these guys. So that's two guys in each position. We're talking about, at the very best, our C team. At the very best, our C center backs. Personally, I'd probably put Cameron Carter-Vickers ahead of these two as well. So you're talking about a C and a D center back at the very best. Sam Vines is probably B because you've got Anthony Robinson ahead of him, and after that, there isn't really a ton of options. So Sam Vines is probably our B. You could argue back and forth between him and Bello. I think they're different types of players. Bello's more technical. At the 6th position, obviously, Tyler Adams is there. Owen Otasawi is there. You could even say that Johnny Cardoso is there ahead of Jackson Yueill. Personally, I think Tanner Tessman is there. But if we're being charitable, let's put Jackson Yueill as the C holding midfielder for this under 23 group. Chris Durkin may even be ahead of him. I don't know if he's quite there yet, but he could be. Attacking midfield, guys. We've got Weston McKennie. We've got Gio Reyna. We've got Brendan Aronson. In my opinion, Caden Clark, Cole Bassett. Having Djordje Mihailovic is probably a D attacking midfielder. Johnny Cardoso is playing out of position in this roster in order to accommodate that. I'm going to put him as a C or D when it comes to attacking because I don't think he's one of our first attacking midfielders. Llanez is probably a B because you've got Christian Pulisic ahead of him. Llanez is probably a B because you have Christian Pulisic ahead of him, so that's where it's good to see. Ahead of Jonathan Lewis, you've got Tim Weah, you've got Yunus Musa. Ahead of Jonathan Lewis, you've got Tim Weah, you've got Gio Reyna, you've got Yunus Musa who can play there, so you're talking about C or D winger at best. And at forward, it's not even close. Josh Sargent, Matthew Hoppy, Daryl Dike, and Nico Giawacchini are all eligible for under 23s. Sebastian Soto and Jesus Ferreira means we probably have our D options. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I will respond. Have a great week, and I will see you next Tuesday.